right. Well, we're still in in the book of Judges. We're looking at chapter 15 tonight. And if you've read over this, if you've been reading up, it may almost seem like a broken record of the problems that Samson had. But I think the chapter breaks are pretty good. They're well done in this. There's almost a different theme or idea in each one of these chapters. And if you read through Judges 15, what is the main problem, or maybe sin sin that Samson is dealing with in this chapter? Okay, yeah. I mean, that seems to be a theme carried on in every single chapter, and that's definitely there. There's another one, I think, that's more prominent, and it comes up several times. Vengeance. Vengeance. Are we to take vengeance? Deuteronomy chapter 25, the Song of Moses, tells us that we are to leave vengeance to the Lord. Somewhere, I think it's maybe somewhere in Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Samuel, David is talking about how after he has spared Saul, that he prays that the Lord give me vengeance. He doesn't want to go and get vengeance for himself, but he prays the Lord for it in some way or another. Does David ever get vengeance on Saul? He does through the Lord. He leaves it to the Lord to do. He does not take it for himself. And if you do just a cursory study of the word vengeance throughout the Old Testament, it's almost always used with God. And the only time I could say I saw it, I didn't do a thorough one, but just briefly looking over it, I only ever seen it with Samuel other than the Lord when it came to vengeance. We do see it talked about where no one's to give vengeance, or God will enact vengeance on those who may kill Cain. And then Cain's, what was his name? The great-great-grandfather who said, if Cain is avenged 7 times, then Laban will be avenged 70 times 7. And those are other times I see this word pop up in the Hebrew. So here, as before, the story of Samson, we know a lot already about him at this point. But we see this cycle of violence continue all throughout this chapter. Except here, you see this cycle of vengeance. What generally happens when you avenge yourself on someone? Like say somebody did something to you, and so you go and you get them back. And then what happens? They come back, and then you get them back and forth. And that's exactly what happens. You see this back and forth between Samson and the Philistines again and again and again. And it's spiraling out of control. It starts off in verse 1, after a while, in the time of the wheat harvest, Samson visited his wife with a young goat and said, I will go into my wife in her room, but her father did not let him enter. Her father said, I really thought that you hated her intensely, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister more beautiful than she? Please let her be yours instead. So, was this girl Samson's wife? Yeah, the text says so. They were married. Samson called her my wife. He goes down there to take her, and as he has the right to, as being his wife. But what did the dad do? Gave her to someone else. Now, if you were listening to Pew Packers, you already know the answer. Was this father and this wife of Samson's, were they Israelites or Philistines? What's their perspective on marriage? Oh, you don't want her? Oh, we'll just give her to somebody else. And you can have her sister. How about that? I thought you hated her, so I got rid of her for you. You should be happy, right? That's almost the idea they seem to have. They were very, very loose in their dealings with this type of thing. So he tells her here, have the younger sister. Samson said in verse 3, this time I shall be blameless in regard to the Philistines when I do them hard. This time I will be blameless in my dealings with the Philistines. All right, so what do you think he's saying there? Let me say this actually before you answer that. a better, maybe not better, but another way you could render this is, as of now, I am free of any Philistine obligation. Or maybe you could say, I will be free of the Philistines because of this. You see what I'm saying? That's when you see that phrase in the beginning, when he says, this time I shall be blameless, he's not saying, well, last time I wasn't blameless, but this time I will be blameless. He's not saying that. He's talking about the relationship that he has been building with the Philistines. He's been building a relationship with them, right? What happened the last time there was a disagreement, or not disagreement, but a situation between him and the Philistines? Remember, that was the riddle. Remember that? And they misused his wife by getting her to tell them the answer. He knew it, but he resolved that by giving the 30 clothes, but he went and killed some other Philistines, took their clothes and gave it to them. So now he's saying, I am resolved of any kind of relationship duty I may have with you Philistines. I'm going to go and I'm going to enact my vengeance out upon you. That is what he's saying here when he makes that statement there in verse 3. This time I shall be blameless in regard to the Philistines. We're done with this. I'm going to do them harm. And so he goes out and he catches 300 foxes, took torches and turned the foxes tail to tail and put one torch in the middle between the two tails. When he had set fire to the torches, he released the foxes into the standing grain of the Philistines, thus burning up both the shocks and the standing grain, along with the vineyards and the groves. So he sets those poor little guys' tails on fire and lets them loose, and they run all over the place, burning everything down. 300 foxes. I don't know why, but I just racked my brain on how did he manage this. 300 foxes. How long would that have taken? If it was foxes, they are solitary animals. That would have taken a long time. Or some commentators say they don't think it was. They think it was a jackal of some kind, which I agree with Larry. That's even harder. That's even more dangerous. But he did it.
Based on that verse, what time of year does it tell you this?
Well, it's harvest time.
There are shocks.
Yep. So it's the best time to get things are looking good, and then it's all gone for the Philistines. So they're going to not be happy. So he lost his wife because the Philistine father gave her away to someone else. So he enacted his revenge by burning out a lot of their crops. Pretty significant. So the Philistines in verse 6, who did this? And they said, that they there is probably the relatives of that girl, the wife. They said, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he took his wife and gave her to his companion. So the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. Evil people. So they got back at Samson. So Samson said to them, since you act like this, I will surely take revenge on you, but after that I will quit. He's trying to not let it spiral too far out of control, right? So he struck them ruthlessly with a great slaughter, and he went down and lived in the cleft of the rock of Edom. So we don't know what that great slaughter was, but he killed a lot of them again. And this time the Philistines went up and they camped in Judah and spread out in Lehi. And the men of Judah said, why have you come up against us? And they said, we have come up to bind Samson in order to do to him as he did to us. Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to get Samson. And like we were discussing in the Pew Packers, what is wrong with this picture? 3,000. So they know how strong Samson is. They know that the Lord is blessing him in some way. Why aren't they rallying together and going against the Philistines, like we've seen in other times with the other judges? Why? I think it's what I was saying during Pew Packers. They've gotten used to the arrangement, the status quo. They don't want to change things. One of the things I learned when I was over in Afghanistan about the people there was that they had been in subjection in one form or another for centuries. Centuries. And when you're there and you see that and you're trying to help them come up out of the situation they had been in, to give them some kind of democracy or freedom, guess what? They didn't want it. They did not want it. They didn't know how to use it. They didn't know what that was about. They didn't understand anything that we were trying to help them to achieve. They have been so long under a suppressive regime for centuries, they knew nothing else. And I think Israel was getting close to that. How long did the Philistines oppress the Israelites? Remember? 40 years. How long did Samson judge? 20 years. So I don't know how long it's been going, but it's been a while. It's been a while now. Because Samson's life isn't going to be around much longer. Well, he could. I'm always impressed whenever I think about him pulling up that gate and taking it up the mountain. And so you have this judge. The Israelites know the kind of power that he has, and yet they take him. He makes them swear you won't kill me. Okay. He lets them bound him, and the text tells us with a new rope, because it has never been used. It's a strong rope, and they take him to the Philistines. When he gets there, he tears that off like it was flax. It just like melts off of his hands. He just tears it off. No problem at all. Immediately grabs the jawbone of a donkey. And in that situation, should he touch that jawbone of a donkey? Should he touch that? Why not? It's a Nazarite. But wait a minute. I mean, he's got 3,000 Judeans. He's bound. He's got thousands of Philistines. He's surrounded. He breaks the rope. He needs a weapon. I mean, that's the closest thing, right? So surely God will understand. He grabs it and kills 1,000. 1,000. That's insane. One man. Would he be tired afterward? Surely. I mean, surely. We know he was thirsty. And I think he probably was thirsty maybe even to the point of death. He needed water, or else they were going to overtake him if they came back. And so he kills them, and then he verse 14. I do want to point this out. Verse 14. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines shouted as they met him, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily, so that the ropes that were on his arms were as flax, that is, burned with fire, and his bonds dropped from his hands. He found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, so he reached out, took it, and killed 1,000 men with it. Then Samson said, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, I have killed 1,000 men. Now in the English, that doesn't rhyme well. In the Hebrew, it rhymed pretty well. So he puts that out there, and when he had finished speaking, he threw the jawbone from his hand, probably realizing, well, I'm not supposed to have that. And he names the place Ramath Lehi, and then he became very thirsty, and he called to the Lord and said, you have given this great deliverance by the hand of your servant, and now shall I die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised? And of course, we know God gives him water. How many times before this do we see in the text Samson inquire of the Lord? Now, this is the first time. How much praise, before he realized how thirsty he was, there was no water around, how much praise did he give to God after that amazing battle of killing 1,000 men? None. And how much vengeance has played out in this chapter so far? Back, forth, back and forth. I think there's 4 instances of a back and forth between the two. But God was still with Samson. Does that seem... Go ahead.
I don't know that I'd call this 1,000 vengeance. He hadn't done anything.
True, but the vengeance...
He killed the great slaughter, and then he went away.
Right.
And then
And now they're coming back to
he's continuing the slaughter.
yeah. The vengeance is is the back and forth.
There wasn't any back for him.
Oh, not after that one, no. Well, not yet. But yeah, my point is, why would God continue to use a man like Samson? Do you think God should have cut him off at this point? Now, we know the answer. It's obviously no, because he doesn't. But what I really want us to do is think about the why. Why not? Yeah, Nebuchadnezzar. What about the Assyrians? What about every single king from the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom? This passage should give us great hope. If God can continue to work out his will in a man who is greatly blessed by God, and yet he isn't using those blessings and those talents in a way that he ought to, do you ever feel like maybe you don't know how to use the talents God has given you? I'm not saying we're being Samson here. I'm not saying that. But I know there's many times where I feel like am I doing this right? I'm trying to use it right. I'm trying to use all the talents God has given me. If God can continue to work out his will in Samson, can he continue to work out his will through you? I think he can. It may not always be obvious to us. He may have to knock on our heads a little bit to try to get our attention of what he's putting forth for us. Are there things you want to do for the kingdom of God? Maybe you want to find somebody that you can actually talk to about the Word of God in the Bible. Maybe have a Bible study or be able to reach out to somebody. If that's true, have you prayed about those things? You remember the lesson from Sunday night? Was it Sunday night? Or Sunday morning? Yeah, Sunday morning. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 through 7 on being ready for battle. And what kind of weapons do we use in that battle? What is our target? What is our objective? Do we have authority? And all of it is centered around prayer. Isn't it? It's prayer. It's seeking God's favor or seeking God's counsel, going to him and asking for his favor, petitions, and putting them before him. And I believe if you pray and you're consistent in it, he will answer those prayers. Maybe it's you want to have Bible studies, or maybe you want to be able to do something in the kingdom. Pray. And when you do, keep your eyes open and he will provide the way. I often wonder, I don't know, we don't have all the text about what Samson did, but he knew that he had these blessings from God. Did he ever ask God, what do you want me to do with this? This great strength you have given me, Lord, what do you want me to do? We don't know if he asked that or not, but what did Samson do? What did he do with that great strength? What did he do with it? Well, but for what reason? Mainly selfish reasons. But all those things happened because I think God put that in his way. He made it happen. Because the beginning of the story, doesn't it look like, I shouldn't say that. It was Samson trying to endear himself to the Philistines. He gets the wife. He has their companions. He does the marriage ceremony just like they would. But when they began to reject him because of the happened with the clothing, they gave away his wife. That's it. I am done with this. And I'm going to take my vengeance out on you. And then he's going to do it again. But this time I'm done with it. And then he goes down south. But then they come after him. And then even the Israelites even try to take him and give him back to the Philistines to appease the Philistines. But God has other plans. But God can work with us, like you said, wherever we are at. And I think everyone here is in a far better position than Samson. I want to hope, and I want to think that Samson made it. That when he lost his eyes and he was back in there, even though it was a vengeance on him, he did inquire of the Lord about that. And probably in the same way that David did. He prayed that the Lord would grant him vengeance. He was talking about Saul. here, or toward the end, before Samson dies, I think he's asking the same thing. And I want to hope that he made it. He did. That's right. And good for him to have that better attitude than he had had before. But the point, as we've already mentioned many times, the point of this passage is showing, again, where things are going in Israel. They're going poorly. The people have always been doing evil in the sight of the Lord, but now it's so much to the point where they don't even really follow after a judge. And even the judge isn't really doing what they ought to be doing. Everything's going downhill. And from this point, after this, we're going to look at specific situations. That the book of Judges looks at specific situations that are just decrepit, terrible things. You wouldn't even see happening in the Gentile world, but it's happening in Israel. It's getting bad, and things are going to need to change. You're going to raise your hand? Maybe in a little bit. True, it could be. But these were given for a reason. I think you're right. I think that's is what happened. When they took his eyes, he became blind so that hopefully he might see, I think. But I think these situations were given to us, either they were given as a snapshot of his life or to show this is the direction of Israel. As I mentioned last week, that this is going to be a shadow of what the life of Israel is going to be going forward. They're going to continue as a whole nation going in this direction, going down until I have to send them off into captivity and really get them to understand who I am and who they are. If there's any correlation to anything, I can see it there. But in this chapter, the sin of vengeance and revenge is sticking out pretty vehemently. Do you ever have that feeling of wanting to take vengeance or have revenge on somebody? When you remember the life of Samson here in chapter 15. Next week, chapter 16, we're going to look at beginning the situation with Delilah, and we'll be looking a little closer at that. So read ahead, Pew Packers. We'll be taking a look at that, chapter 16, and getting closer to bringing the life of Samson to a close. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, I saw one commentator, and I'm not using that as a benchmark, but one also made that argument. But and I could be wrong, but what convinces me that he's not doing this in order to get after the Philistines is that he wants to have that wife, but he has no authority to do that. And it's against the law of God. Nowhere do we ever see God use anybody that is supposed to, either his judge or is righteous or following him, violating his own law in order to get after someone in that manner, like we see Samson doing, marrying a Philistine woman. And not only that, he does it in the Philistine territory. He's endearing himself to them. He's doing it with their ceremonies. He's going to be touching dead bodies. And even though the text doesn't say it, the fact that it talks about him going to the vineyard, brazenly putting himself in situations where he's going to be tempted to violate that Nazirite vow, I think he probably did, because we see other occasions where it doesn't seem to bother him at all to violate that Nazirite vow. Yeah, and God continues to use him. Well, yeah, he does have a purpose for him. My point has always been that Samson has been against the purpose, unwittingly probably, but he's just doing his own thing. Just like with Nebuchadnezzar. God continued to bless him, even though he was trying to throw the three friends of Daniel into a fire. And he built the golden image that had people bow down. Then he had a dream. Oh, don't get arrogant, but then he gets arrogant anyway. And it took a while for him to come to his senses. And I think it's the same thing with Samson. It took him a while to realize who's really in control. Samson, you may be strong, but you're not in control. Because even at the very end, when we'll see next week with Delilah, he thought he still had that strength. He had no idea the Spirit of God had left him. I'm going to go take care of these guys, but he couldn't do it. And he lost his eyes, and they took him off into captivity. Not blessed anymore. Why? Arrogant. And God it wasn't because of one instance, but because of multiple. And I think that's why these are put here to show us that he just went too far, and God said, that's it. and he let him go off to captivity. And it's for our understanding in the sense of shown to us in this sense where it could be where he was much better than we realize, but it's put here in the book of Judges to continue this slope we're seeing. It would be a little odd for him to have this slope and then a jump and then straight back down to how bad things get in the next chapters after Samson. But I could be wrong. Yeah, imagine what Samson could have done if he had rallied the troops of Israel and he led them. And then when, things are getting a little tough over there, hang on, I'll take care of it. And he goes over there. And he comes back and he could just wipe them off the face of the planet. Literally. He could have taken the Philistines away for good. Would that have been beneficial to Israel if the Philistines were gone in the days of Samson? Yeah, they're a thorn in their side for how long? A long, long time. Well, not all of them. I mean, he could have got rid of those. Samson was brought up to do that. He chose not to. Yep. And, I think it was under Solomon where they really are subdued and they're done away with under Solomon. Yep. We'll take a look at that next week.